This virtual town hall for Rez will not be, it's not going to be super heavy on content. We super wanted a sort of space to engage with the community about their usage of Rez and a lot of other details. So the first little bit is going to be, so it is July 26th. First little bit is going to be just some project info, the kind of administrative details and some origins for people who are new to Rez, have never used it, that kind of a thing, just to like get people in at the ground floor, just enough to understand what we're even talking about to a degree. And there's a series of interactive polls that I'm hoping that you'll all be willing to engage with me on. It's not super complicated. I'll at the time I will drop a link in the chat for people to get to the poll site. So I'll bring that to you in a second. So that's kind of how it's going to go. And then whatever time left over is available for Q&A. So just, drop your questions in the chat. I don't know how, I think they're both very busy, but a couple of my other TSC members are in the meeting as well. So if they may respond to you directly as well. And for the purposes of recording, Shannon's going to read off any questions that are asked as well. So appreciate it. All right, so let's get started. Here's a bit of a project info sheet for Rez. This is nothing new or nothing surprising for a lot of people, but Rez joined the Academy Software Foundation at the incubation level about a little over a year ago at this point. We just had our first year project review back in, I want to say it was May or April. One significant item of news is that, and this was announced in last week's TSC meeting, Alan Johns, the contributor originally for Rez, and the previous chair, has stepped down from both his chair role and from the TSC. So we wish him well, and basically, Alan could never have been replaced on Rez, and he'll still be around in the community, periodically, but he's not really being looked to right now for the direction of the project and the way that we sort of intend to, move forward with things. He wanted to get it into the Academy Software Foundation, to leave it in good hands, to take good care of it for everyone, on his behalf, and that's kind of what we've done. That's where we're going. So that's kind of how it is right now. The remaining TSC members are myself and Jean-Christophe are taking over as co-chairs for the moment, and Brendan and Torsten are also on the TSC at the moment. That does leave a slot open for the TSC, and sometime in the near future, we will most likely post something to the ASWF Slack calling out for anyone who's interested in being a TSC member, and kind of what that entails and that kind of a thing. I'm not going to get into that right now. It's not super glamorous per se, but just in case anyone here is interested, feel free to reach out. So that's kind of all the project info initial stuff. So you have all the right links and you can get to the project if you haven't seen this before. Here's sort of our status in the Academy Software Foundation. We have dealt with a number of issues on our way through incubation into full adoption, but we haven't addressed everything yet. Notably, most of it's boilerplate, things like contributing and code of conduct pages and stuff like that. We just need to kind of work through a few of those issues and just have a little time to bang on them and make them nice and squeaky clean for everyone to work on. Probably the most challenging thing there is a roadmap, because there are a number of sort of outstanding proposals and things for the project in general, but they aren't really clearly defined in terms of a structured roadmap. A lot of them are mostly independent. They don't really depend on one another, so that's not really a big deal in terms of how to map them out, but it would be sort of important for us to at least try to communicate how we plan the development to move forward on the project and so forth. And not much has changed on this in the last 6 months, but we did deal with a pesky virtual ENV licensing issue not that long ago, so that's a little bit of progress on that front. Speaking of which, here's a little bit of history for people who aren't familiar with how Rez came to be and that kind of a thing. Rez grew out of originally a tool called DRD config in Dr. D Studios, which has since closed down in 2013. It was originally mainly used to manage C++ packages, and was just a Python solver with some bash utilities. The sort of version 2 implementation happened largely at Method Studios LA back in 2014, and the and sort of became a lot more open in a lot of respects, sort of more pluggable, more sort of agnostic of a lot of the different technology involved, whereas the original was much more kind of tied down and locked down to the original implementations of those things. So why Rez? For people who are not familiar with Rez, um, there are a lot of reasons why Rez or something like Rez is useful, but I think a lot of the the reason I like to give, the reason I like to sort of bring up is the reason Rez sort of came to be was out of a need for having sort of any sort of modularity or separation of configuration and code applied to a pipeline. And the way visual effects studios work, things are upversioned nearly constantly. New versions of software are released, daily, if not hourly, if not faster sometimes, depending on what exactly is going on. And it's really hard to have a package management solution or situation that permits that level of control, flexibility, modularity over all the individual components, lets a production retool itself, lets multiple productions run concurrently with different sets of packages at the same time. A lot of packaging solutions are kind of set on the concept of just having one version of something live at a time. A lot of us are familiar with the concept of how virtual ENVs work, but if you try to apply the same type of solution to C++ code or operating system level packages, it can get really nasty really fast. So Rez was kind of a solution that was trying to solve some of those problems, and successfully enough that it sort of went through the life cycle that it did from back in 2010 to 2011 all the way through to today. So that's sort of a concept for why Rez exists, how it came to be, and that kind of a thing. And as a low level sort of just explanation, this is super boring to anyone already familiar with Rez, but basically the simple abstraction is just that packages are installed to a central repository, not into some, and environments are composed dynamically out of those packages, which have definitions like the one on the screen, ideally as simple as that, and sometimes as simple or even more simple than that. And the basic idea being that out of a big pile of packages and expressed dependencies, we can just dynamically assemble an environment which uses all of those packages, reconfigures its environment, usually in seconds, just to be able to leverage the software in that way. And it's as simple as upgrading the request to fulfill a new resolve to basically have a new environment with all those things. Very sort of pip-like, if you're familiar with pip, and things of that nature. So I won't stick on that too long, mainly just because most people coming to this already know all of this, but just in case you kind of were wondering how Rez is, doing all of that. What are the current focuses of the project? So, one is obviously just in the background, the TSC is just trying to sort of slow burn, meet adoption requirements bit by bit. As such, normally this is where like a roadmap slide would go, but we don't really have a roadmap. So this is kind of like the focus is like what have been the most recent sorts of development going on in the project. One of which is the Windows Shell PR, which I want to send a huge thanks to Samuel Eichner, who started it, and Jonas Savrin, who's largely completed it. We sort of have a need to urgently progress and test on this, mainly because both Sam and Jonas were affected in their employment situations recently, and so it's kind of there's a timer on how we get this out and get this done. So I'm going to be doing some testing on this soon, and I super invite anyone else to be able to do so. The idea is that it's backwards compatible. It's primarily aimed at Git Bash Windows implementations. So if you're in a situation like that, I highly recommend you give it a go for us. It's as I said, in a complete testable state. There's only a couple of documentation bits and bobs to deal with, and I have a couple of notes for Jonas that we might try to work on. But if this is something that you're interested in, any amount of testing, even like locally on just a Windows machine, if that's the kind of work you're doing or the kind of work you want to do, definitely give it a try. Jean-Christophe has spent a significant amount of time working on a new ResPip implementation. ResPip is sort of something that we always imagined ought to have been a separate Rez plugin that wasn't necessarily hosted out of Rez itself. And Jean-Christophe's work is very much geared at sort of building it back up again from the ground up, starting over from scratch, almost a Res Pip 2 or Res Pip X, however you want to call that. Um, and he's on a version 0.20, needs some testing. So if you have any, um, if you currently use or rely on ResPip, it's especially in that situation that we would love to have your feedback and your testing on it. Um, even if it's not something you release into production, just to give it a go and see if it is, locally generating things the way you need them to, and so forth. And not quite as immediately, but one of the next focuses that we're really hoping to focus on is cloud repositories. This is in the very early stages right now. We're really interested in talking to people who would benefit from using this kind of a feature, the kinds of people who maybe you're a multi-site studio and you actively use AWS, or GCP filers to send files back and forth and that kind of a thing. Would a cloud repository be very useful to you for packages? Do you already do something, but it's a homegrown solution? Like, especially in those situations, we'd really like to have a chat, even if it's just kind of like asking a few questions about, maybe how a replacement solution might look for you optimally, things like that. So yes, please say hi in the ASWF Slack, message us, DM us directly if you want, me, Jean-Christophe, anyone on the TSC, please. Next up, I'd want to give a big thank you to the community in general. The Rez Slack channel in the ASWF Slack receives a lot of community discussion. Some of that's, I think of this as a double-edged sword. This is good because we have a lot of people chatting about Rez. There's a lot of discussion around it, a lot of how to use it, a lot of people willing to talk to you about their solutions for various issues, things of that nature. On the flip side, I also look at this as a sort of indication that perhaps our documentation is insufficient, and there certainly is a GitHub issue to this effect. So, um, thank you for anyone who comes in the Slack, asks questions, and gives answers and any of that. It's great to see an active community, and the fact that we're the most active ASWF channel that there even is, given it started a year and a half ago. But it's also, I don't know, evidence of improvement needed in some respects, I feel. So that is kind of already it for content in terms of just talking about the project, what is Rez, where are we at, and now I've got a time for polls. I'm going to put a link in the chat. Please, if you could, load it up in a browser. It should work just fine on a phone. It won't show anything right this second, but it will once I step onto the next slide, which should load up. And this is about 25 questions. I'll have some things to talk about during the questions. A lot of this is basically trying to find out how are you using Rez? Like, what are various, what are some of the specifics in terms of you and your studio? By the way, this is anonymous. This is anonymous. Like, your name is not attached to this, whatever. And it doesn't bother me whatsoever if there's 5 people from your studio on the call or whatever. Like, and it's all the same answers. Just answer for yourself, for you or your company or whatever. And for any questions that don't really apply to you, just don't answer that one. That's fine. And yeah, it's going to do this. There's going to be like multiple yeses and whatever, multiple nos. That's totally fine. And I expect a degree. Like, they've used this same tool in the Academy Software Foundation meetings in past years. So I tried to use the same thing just for like continuity. So some good answers here. Several of the questions are preceded with answers where you can just click the thumbs up or the thumbs down or whatever to basically say yes. If it doesn't have the answer that you need, or you want to put something you want to clarify, like, hey, yes, completely in LA, that's fine. Just type it in. If you just want to hit the upvote on one answer, it's also fine. All useful data. And I'm not expecting everyone to reply, but since there's about 20 to 30 people in the call and about 15 upvotes, I'll consider like 15, 20 answers very good. So thank you for that. That's actually quite a bit more votes than I expected. So excellent. So that's the first question. Second question, are you currently evaluating or new to using Rez? So in other words, and by new, I mean if you started using it within the past year, that's kind of my cutoff. Like when Rez became part of the Academy Software Foundation, ballpark there, or at the very least, do you consider Rez new to your company, if you or your workflow or whatever it is that you do? So, evaluating or new. More yeses than nos. That is actually shocking. I was not expecting. I was absolutely expecting a different answer to that. Okay, 10, 4, 4. It's about 20 replies. Yeah, okay. All right, all right. I'm actually, that makes me very happy to see because it just means that we're getting out there. There's gonna be a few questions directly at you new people. So, for example, if you're new to Rez, have you struggled finding answers to your questions in the docs? Very much to that point earlier on the Slack sort of thing. I know for some people what the answer will be, but I'd like to know. Ooh, ooh, painful, so painful. All right. Yeah, no, this and nothing here. There's a couple of questions here about, say, the TSC feedback for us and that kind of a thing. We're not going to be offended in any way whatsoever. Just if I'm hamming it up for the drama whatsoever, that's just me. 15 yeses, 14 yeses. All right. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. What's been more helpful to you? Colleagues, Slack, or Docs? And if something else has been, you can type in the answer if something else has been better for you. Mm-hmm. Okay. Ah, resconfig py. Yep. Okay. That's a good one. All right. You can also nothing stops you from upvoting more than one thing. If it's like colleagues and Slack, that's fine. You know, if it's more than one thing, it's not mutually exclusive. If you feel it applies to you, that's fine. And some of the future questions, they're also definitely not mutually exclusive. Slack documentation, GitHub discussions. Okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. That's about the right number of answers. Thank you very much for that. Okay. OS, please. And if you use multiple, please say both. Like, please label all the OSs you use. There is another question about multiple OSs, but that is upcoming. Let's see, what are we on? Yeah, okay, I'm on 5. Okay, that was fast. A lot of Linux. Thank you. A lot of Linux, a lot of OS, Windows sent. Yep, sounds good. The next question is for the Linux responders, which distributions and versions, if you can, please. Um, major version's fine. You don't need to say like 7.3 or something, but just like ballpark, or if you're using multiple, you can do that. It's just to get a rough list. Rocky 8. Okay. Cent 7. Yep. 7.3 multiple. Okay. Get a few more in here. Elite. All right. Very nice. Any any Nix users? I'll call you out. Okay. No. All right. Cent 7, considering Rocky 8.7. Okay. Still a lot of Cent 7, a lot more than I expected. 220. Okay. That's probably all we're going to get there. Next question. What shells are you using Rez with? I bucketed PowerShell and CMD, kind of roughly. I bucketed Git Bash and MSys2 a little bit. If there's any other shell, you're being creative, you like, I don't know, the fish shell, TCSH, CSH, please put those in. I suppose you might be a Flame user or something. Not sure. I'm not sure which distros use TCSH right now. Okay. And I'm assuming most of the Z shell users are coming from OS 10, but there might be a few of you on Linux as well. So nice to know. Okay. Not bad. Mostly Bash, a little bit of the others. Surprised at the number of Git Bash, but maybe I shouldn't be from earlier discussions. Okay. And do you use Rez in a multiple OS or multiple shell set of environments? In other words, does your company use more than one OS, more than one shell, more than like, and by more than one OS, I don't mean like Rocky 8 and Rocky 9, but I mean like, do you use like Cent and Mac or Windows and some Linux and Mac or some Linux, any combination? Wow, okay. That's quite, it's quite biased. Interesting. Okay, good question. Thank you. Scale of 1 to 10, or scale of 1 to 5, how happy are you? 5 is the top. How happy are you with Rez itself? Not necessarily your Rez ecosystem, not necessarily your not necessarily your Rez packages, not necessarily the tools that you've written in, into Rez packages, the APIs you've written, just how happy are you with Rez itself? Okay, that's a lot of 4s, a couple 3s. All right, very nice. Appreciate that. Looks like we're not doing everything wrong. Do you still require your Rez installation and API to support a Python older than 3.7? This is maybe the single most contentious question on the entire thing. Okay. Yes. Nine yeses, five no's, 6 no's. Okay. Give it one more second. So if the no's want to catch up. Oh, someone took their vote away. All right. Hopefully not for long. Okay. Well, the next question's for you, buddy. If you still require a Python older than 3.7, what is your timeline for dropping support? So I'm expecting only about 10 answers on this because only about 10 people said no on the last one. And saying 3 months, 6 months, a year, 2 years, just approximate. I'm not expecting that's a commitment whatsoever. It's just kind of trying to know like where your company's at, and if you have to maintain it for some very specific reason to your industry, I'm not going to judge. 1 year, ASAP. Okay, just a few answers, not too much. By C7 end of life. Okay. All right. Good answer. Okay. Not too many replies. I assume that just means that there's no defined timeline, but that's just as fine to know. And do you primarily interact with Rez purely through the CLI tools, or do you leverage the API directly as well? Yep. So, CLI. Okay. Few API users, not too much. About 2/3. Okay. All right. Do you or your company actively track and perform upgrades in alignment with the VFX reference platform? By which I mean basically, are you're looking at the VFX ref platform and you're targeting getting a suite of stuff all compatible with each other for the most part for your productions or for your tool sets or whatever it is you're working on? Or what I would say the no answers to this question would primarily be people in a situation where you're just upgrading to whatever you can upgrade to whenever you can. If it happens to be compatible, great. If it doesn't, whatever. Like that's kind of like, or maybe you're only using Rez for Python packages and it doesn't matter kind of stuff. So yeah, mostly yes, a little bit of no. Okay. And for those of you who said yes, what CYs are you bound to, more or less? I wrote this as like a res style version string. Write it however you want. It's fine. It's just kind of, I'm just getting a rough idea. The fact that so many of you answered still supporting Python 2 makes me very scared for this question. If you don't know exactly, that's fine. There's some rough boundaries. Someone will probably drop the VFX Ref platform in the chat, but I'm not expecting you to know off the top of your head. But anyone who does respond, great. I know probably asking people to do plus less than on their phones might have been a mistake. Okay. Yeah, extra upvote on 2019 less than 2022. I'd like to know who 2021 plus less than 2024 is because you're the only one in that club right now. Okay. Few answers, that's fine. 2018 plus being the lowest. Yep. All right, give that 5 more seconds. Anyone else? Nope. Okay. What build systems do you use? CMake, scones, whatever. Thanks, Michael. It's fine. I'm expecting this list to go crazy. So if you just wanna, I could have put in CMake pre-populated, but let's see. Yep, build command. Bat files. Okay. Scones, couple sconces, couple setup tools. A lot of people relying on the build command. Very good for that. Okay. A lot of people on CMake. I know we're all in the same painful club together. Okay, thank you. Do you use any sort of CI/CD workflow to build, test, or release your res packages? This is very flexible. Ooh, that shot up quick. Very flexible question. Okay, so if you say no, you have to feel bad about it because there's so many people who said yes. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. Wow, that's a lot of people. All right. Good job, that's all I can say. Do you use package caching in production? Just to clarify, we actually had a question about this in the Slack today. Package caching is the way to use Rez to localize packages from another server to a local host for them to have their package payload accessed. That's not the same thing as using a using a memcached server for resolve caching. I'm not asking that. Okay, handful. Right, about 2/3 yes, versus 1/3 no. To the sort of cloud repository question, do you want to host packages on cloud hosted file systems? The phrasing of this question was specifically because, for example, we had that demo from DreamWorks last week in the TSC. I'm encouraging everyone to go back and check that out. Asking them if they're interested in that kind of thing, and very much they weren't because their network is really well optimized and they don't really need it. So, valid answer. Maybe. Okay. Yeah. Think about it. You want to. No one does. Okay. I'm aware of at least, yep, for distribution more than for cloud use. Yep, absolutely. Okay, yeah. Interesting. All right, thank you. That's a good set of answers. I like that. So this is a fun one. Between the current major existing res enhancement proposals, which are you most interested in seeing more active development on? And for a little bit of clarity here, if your answer is provides, that's in REP 0. Sorry, lost my mic for a second there. The res test enhancements is primarily just for like res test CLI stuff, like being able to better select a test and being able to run across variants in sort of better ways and specify the res tests in the package PYs in better ways, so forth. Yep, provides definitely. Documentation takes the lead. REP recipe repositories, named variants. Okay. The named variants proposal, by the way, totally give it a look over if you haven't already. That's relatively new from Dhruv. I'm not sure if I'm saying his name right, but he's spent a lot of time on that proposal and it looks really solid. Package and context localization. Yep. Just for clarity too, for 003, it doesn't surprise me that's as low as it is. Most of the work was in a manner completed, but there were other enhancements and other sort of bugs that could be worked out and improved about it. So that's why it's still on the list, even though in large part many of the core functionality is there actually. Yep. Yeah. Okay. Hopefully my mic didn't cut off earlier when I was saying what you just said, Jean-Christophe, but maybe it did. Sorry about that. All right, thanks for that. I wanted people to spend a little time on that. This question alone is definitely going to help drive how we work on things in the future. So thank you for focusing on that. How happy are you with the TSC in its first year of running the project? And you may not be familiar with how it's been running if you haven't been to TSC meetings. Frankly, there are plenty of people in the meeting right now who I know have never been to a TSC meeting. So that's fine, but that means your impression of us is purely based on the Rez release schedule, communication in Slack, community answering questions, that kind of a thing. So please just base your decision purely off of that, and we're not going to feel bad if you hit the one button. And if you don't answer at all, then I'll assume that's code for we're just glad we're not the one doing it. Nope. Okay. No one wants to say it. All right. Yeah, not sure. Okay, fair enough. Okay, someone likes us. Torsten, was that you? Okay, sorry. All right, moving on. What do you wish we do more of, better, less of, etc.? If that's just work on documentation per the question 2 questions ago, I am not offended in the least. And if it's just communicate better, release more, anything is fair game here. Just, yep, documentation, cool. Yikes. Okay. All right, guys. I think we figured out what we need. Yep. Releases, getting releases out. Fair enough. Like, we the TSC certainly had our own opinion, and I won't say it differs significantly, but I figured we would sort of know roughly where things fell. I am surprised at how badly people feel the documentation is hurting, but maybe I shouldn't have been that surprised. Okay, we're kind of in the home stretch here. And most of this is TSC oriented, so some of you may have very little in the way of opinions about it, but I must ask for my own peace of mind. If you have attended them, have you found them useful? I only see about just a small handful of people who have been at TSC meetings in here, so I'm going to expect 2, maybe 3 votes on this, like who are not part of the TSC already. So, okay, 1 yes, 1 no. 2 yes. Thank you. 3 yes. All right, that's about the max based on who I know has attended, so we'll leave it at that. Thank you. If you haven't, why not? Feel free to write in your own answer, but I had a few obvious answers that are typical for people. I'll consider this question a success if no one clicks the time slot button. I know it can be a sore spot for some people, and we have discussed moving the TSC meeting around a little bit, but now that Alan is not on the TSC, there might be less reason to move it. Okay, too many for the most part. Thank you. Have you or your company contributed to Rez development? To your knowledge. If you don't know, just write in a don't know, or maybe or something. That's fine too. Racking up about 15 replies. Okay. All right. Pretty solid, thank you. And this is the last question on the poll. What barriers are you aware of for any development contributions, even if that is just docs for something that you needed answered, and maybe now you can submit the doc. And if it's you're not a developer, or your company doesn't have the spare developers, that's kind of the kind of thing I expect. Free form answers, anything goes. Mm-hmm. Okay. Fair enough. That's good on the licensing. So hopefully that's a non-issue now. CLA stuck in legal. Yep. Okay. How to use the API with good examples. Often time to clear in-house code. Public PR. Okay. All right. Yeah, people taking a little bit of time to put some longer answers in here, so I'll leave this up for just a little bit longer while I prepare my next slide. So to be honest, that is pretty much it for what I had planned today. The next little bit here is just a thank you. I have one other request for people. There is a long ago, slightly non-maintained Google Doc out there that I'm going to murder your name, sorry, Bflock has reminded me exists, that where studios have written down whether or not they use Rez, how they use it, how many sites they use it in, and that kind of a thing. It's just some basic stats tracking. If you or your studio, this isn't really like any sort of official sort of source of data, in that like no one's really going to be calling up your company and verifying anything, but we just kind of wanted to know, for example, if you're new and you want to put your name on the list, please do so. That helps us a lot. If you no longer use it because you've got some other solution, maybe you're, I don't know, helping someone else test the SPK package manager that's, I don't know, sort of under closed development currently or whatever. Um, you know, that kind of thing is useful too. If you've changed the number of sites you use it in, that sort of a thing. Any amount of data updates you want to provide to this are much appreciated. Your responses thus far are hugely influential in driving the project as it goes forward here. So with that, it's kind of open floor for Q&A for either for us, anyone on the TSC, product members, for myself, and so on. Especially if it regards any of those questions in the back, or maybe you want to pipe up and clarify an answer and say like, hey, it's this, like that's why it's this way, kind of a thing. So feel free. And if you want, I can stop sharing and unmute people selectively, or Shannon can help me. Let's see. Oh.
Yeah, if you
wrong.
have questions, feel free to type them into the Q&A box, and then they'll show up for everybody. You can also put them in the chat.
Yeah. There we go. All right. The shares will be gone now. Really appreciate it. And to be fair, we've had virtual town halls before, and we don't usually actually get a lot of questions beyond just, what's the future of the development, and some of that's already been covered. But, at the same time, it's a new group of people. It's the first time we're doing one of these in the ASWF, so certainly happy to see what people have on their minds, and even questions about other kinds of development that haven't even been considered yet. So feel free. Jean-Christophe saying in the chat, thanks to the community. He can't speak right now, but he's really happy to see all the questions, comments, and discussion over on the Slack and the GitHub. If we if we don't get any if no one pipes up for a few minutes or whatever, if you're too shy, it's fine. But one thing I would say is as everyone already has been, feel free to come over to the Slack. Um, if you want to clarify answers to any of your questions, any of our questions over there, you want to discuss or ask other things or talk about the development there, that's all fine by us. In fact, it's kind of the, we're mostly asynchronous, so it's kind of the preferred way of talking for us. But this was a good opportunity to really put out a high quality survey to people who are actively engaged and, you know, take the pulse, so to speak. So again, thank you all for your answers to those questions.